The Young and the Restless Spoilers. In the tangled web of Genoa City, where secrets and lies have always thrived in the shadows, one truth was about to come to light, and it would change everything. For months, the residents of Genoa City had lived under the illusion of stability, unaware of the dangerous currents swirling beneath the surface. At the center of it all was Cain Ashby, whose lies and manipulations had caused chaos for both the Abbotts and the Newmans. But Cain, despite his carefully constructed facade, was starting to unravel. His dirty secrets, once buried deep, were slowly but surely being exposed. And the person who might bring it all down, the one who held the key to Cain's undoing, was someone no one had expected: Noah Newman. Noah had been quiet in recent months, staying out of the family's drama, focusing on his work and his personal life. But all along, he had been harboring a secret about Cain that could destroy him and everyone around him. No one knew it, not even Noah himself until recently, but the key to unraveling Cain's empire lay in the hands of the youngest Newman. The problem? Noah was now in grave danger. As the walls closed in on Cain, someone had decided that Noah had to be silenced. Nick Newman, always the protective father and brother, had been the first to realize that something was wrong. Noah's sudden disappearance, the lack of any trace, all pointed to a carefully orchestrated kidnapping. Nick wasn't about to let his son disappear without a fight. The trail led him to Los Angeles, where Noah had been held captive, but the kidnapper remained elusive. Despite all his efforts, Nick could not locate the person responsible for Noah's abduction. The silence surrounding Noah's whereabouts only deepened the mystery. Who was behind it? What did they want with Noah? Was it truly just to keep him quiet, or was there something more sinister at play? The urgency in Nick's pursuit grew with each passing day. Noah had to be found. Not just because he was his son, but because Nick knew the secrets Noah carried were too dangerous to stay hidden. Cain's guilt was starting to seep through the cracks, and Noah was the only one who could expose it all. If Noah could be brought back, if he could be persuaded to share the truth about what he knew, then Cain's grip on the Abbott family and the Newmans could finally be broken. But Nick knew that bringing Noah back wasn't going to be easy. His son had been through too much, and whatever secret Noah was hiding was clearly weighing on him. He wasn't just a victim, he was the key to bringing Cain to justice. And then, one day, the breakthrough came. Nick finally tracked Noah's location. Through a combination of his own contacts and some help from trusted allies, Nick pinpointed the place where Noah was being kept. The man who had taken him was no amateur. The kidnapper was clever, using false leads and false identities to throw Nick off his trail. But Nick was relentless. When he found Noah, he wasted no time. He broke into the building, took down the guards, and freed his son from the chains that had held him. There was no time to waste. Noah was weak, disoriented, but alive. And now, he had a chance to come home. As they boarded the flight to Nice, Noah's mind was in turmoil. The truth about Cain, the dark secret that he had uncovered, was more than he could bear. He knew that revealing it would tear apart the lives of everyone he loved, but he also knew it was the only way to stop Cain. What would it cost, though, to expose the truth? And could he live with the consequences? These were questions Noah had wrestled with, even as the plane ascended into the sky, carrying him away from the nightmare of captivity and back toward his family. When they arrived in Nice, Noah was rushed to the hospital. His body was battered, bruised, but it was his mind that needed healing. Nick stayed by his side, watching as Noah was treated, but he knew that the real healing would come when the truth was finally revealed. No longer held hostage by fear, Noah was now ready to speak. When he was stable and his mind cleared, he finally confessed. Cain had killed someone. A man who had been a threat to him, a man whose death had been covered up in the name of power. Cain's dirty secret was that he had committed murder, and Noah was the only one who could expose him for it. As the words left Noah's mouth, the world seemed to shift. For months, Cain had been walking around Genoa City, his secrets hidden in plain sight. Now, the walls were crumbling. The foundation of his carefully crafted empire was cracking, and Noah's confession was the spark that would ignite the fire. It wasn't just the confession itself that shocked everyone, it was the implications of it. Cain had been hiding behind lies for years, manipulating his way into the Abbott family and the Newmans, all while carrying the weight of a murder on his shoulders. His guilt was now a ticking time bomb, and Noah had just pulled the pin. As the news spread, the reactions were mixed. For some, like Jack and Victoria, the shock was overwhelming. They had trusted Cain, believed in his innocence, and now they were forced to reconcile with the fact that he had been living a lie all this time. Jack's anger burned hot, his sense of betrayal searing through him. Cain had been part of their family, had been given a chance to prove himself, and now it turned out he had been playing them all. The weight of that betrayal was too much to bear. For others, like Sharon, the revelation was bittersweet. Her protective instincts for her son flared as she watched him struggle with the burden of being the one to expose Cain. Mariah had been through so much already, and now Noah's secret would add more pressure to their already strained family dynamic. Sharon knew that this revelation would change everything. The Newmans and the Abbotts were about to be torn apart by the very secrets they had tried to protect. And for Cain, the world was collapsing around him. He had managed to cover up the murder for so long, but now the truth was out. There was no escaping it. The walls that he had built to protect himself, to hide his dark past, were crumbling with every passing moment. Cain knew that this moment would define him, that there would be no going back once the truth was out. But even as he tried to justify his actions, even as he pleaded with those around him to understand the reasons behind his crime, the damage had already been done. His fate was sealed. As the dust began to settle, the question remained, what would happen next? Cain's actions had consequences, and now the Newmans and the Abbotts were forced to face them. How would they react to the revelation that one of their own had committed murder? Could they reconcile with the man who had betrayed them, or was this the end of the line for Cain Ashby? Noah's role in the unfolding drama was undeniable. He had been the one to expose Cain's dark secret, the one who had set the chain of events in motion. And while he had been the catalyst, he knew that the consequences of his actions would ripple far beyond what he had anticipated. Would the family forgive him for bringing the truth to light? Would they be able to move past the pain and betrayal to find a way to heal? The journey was only just beginning, and the road ahead was filled with uncertainty. But one thing was certain, Genoa City would never be the same again. The truth had been exposed, and no amount of power, money, or manipulation could ever undo the damage. Cain's empire had crumbled, and the people who had once trusted him would now have to find a way to rebuild. And as for Noah, the truth had set him free, but it had also bound him to the consequences of his actions, consequences that would shape the future of Genoa City for years to come. In the end, the truth was the most dangerous weapon of all. It had the power to destroy everything in its path, but it also had the power to heal. Only time would tell which path Genoa City would choose. Would they find redemption in the ashes, or would they burn everything to the ground in their quest for justice? The truth, as it often does in Genoa City, had a way of emerging in the most unexpected and dangerous of ways. What had started as a quiet investigation into Cain Ashby's business dealings and personal life had exploded into something far more sinister. The moment Noah Newman publicly accused Cain of murder, a murder he claimed was part of a larger plot to seize control of Jabot and Newman Enterprises, the city seemed to stop in its tracks. The gravity of the claim was staggering. Cain Ashby, a man who had integrated himself into the Abbott family, had betrayed their trust in the most horrific of ways. Yet even as Noah's revelation sent shockwaves through the city, there was an undeniable question lingering in the air: could it be true? Was Cain really the murderer? Or was this some kind of calculated manipulation on Noah's part? Noah, who had been the first to put the pieces together, wasn't just making accusations based on suspicions. He had something far more concrete, something that, when presented, would change everything. The USB drive he handed over to the authorities was more than just a collection of files, it was a weapon, one that contained everything: documents, communications, records that linked Cain to a murder he had desperately tried to cover up. The depth of the conspiracy was staggering, and with it, the implications of what it meant for both the Abbott and Newman families. The police were quick to act. Armed with the information from the USB, they raided Cain's home in the dead of night, the weight of their actions hanging heavily in the air. Cain, once so confident, so untouchable, was now under arrest. The man who had once been welcomed into the family, who had sat at the same table as Victor Newman and Jack Abbott, was now being led away in handcuffs. The shock of the moment was felt not only in the Ashby household but throughout the entire city. Jack Abbott could hardly believe what was happening. He had trusted Cain, believed that the man had genuinely changed, that he had earned his place within the family. Now, all that trust seemed like a cruel joke. Cain had been a part of their world for years, and Jack was left questioning everything. How could he have been so blind? How could he not have seen the darkness lurking beneath the surface? The man who had stood by his side in boardrooms and family gatherings had been a murderer, someone who had been willing to kill in order to take control of not just a company, but an entire legacy. And Victor had been right about him all along. It hurt more than Jack wanted to admit. But amidst the chaos, there was something even more concerning, something that gnawed at Jack's gut. Noah's revelations weren't just about the past. The more Noah spoke, the more he revealed about Cain's plans. It wasn't just the murder of one man, Cain was plotting something far more dangerous. Victor Newman and Jack Abbott were next on his list, and Cain was willing to go to any lengths to take over both Jabot and Newman enterprises. The conspiracy was much bigger than anyone had realized, and now, Noah was the one carrying the burden of that knowledge. As the police led Cain away, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He couldn't let the situation go. There had to be more to the story than what Noah had uncovered. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that Noah wasn't the only one in danger. If Cain had planned to kill Victor and Jack, if he had gone to such extreme lengths to secure control, then what else was he capable of? Noah's capture was only the beginning of a much larger nightmare. As the story unfolded, it became clear that he was no longer just a witness, he had become a target. The question everyone asked was simple: who had kidnapped Noah, and why? It wasn't just the physical threat of kidnapping that made it so terrifying, it was the fact that no one knew who had taken him or what they intended to do with him. The stakes were higher than ever, and Noah's safety was more precarious than anyone realized. In a twist that no one had anticipated, it seemed that Noah's kidnapping was linked to more than just Cain. The possibility that Claire, Cain's partner in crime, was involved began to surface. She had always been an enigma, her loyalties unclear, her intentions shrouded in secrecy. Was she working with Cain to orchestrate a larger plan to take down Victor and Jack? Or had she gone rogue, acting on her own? As the investigation into Noah's disappearance continued, it became increasingly clear that Claire was more than just a bystander. She was likely the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. Nick Newman, desperate to find his son, took matters into his own hands. He tracked down every lead, speaking to contacts, digging into every possible angle. He even reached out to allies within the police force to expedite the search. The idea that someone as close to Cain as Claire could be involved was almost too much for Nick to process. His daughter, Mariah, had been through enough, and now Noah was missing. It was a nightmare that seemed to have no end. Nick's resolve hardened as he focused on one goal: bringing Noah home, safe and sound. When Noah was finally found, it wasn't in some remote location but in a luxurious hotel suite in Nice, far from the clutches of the kidnapping ring. He was disheveled, confused, but alive. Nick and the authorities moved quickly to get him to safety, but even as they celebrated the reunion, Noah's confession rang in their ears. The truth, the whole truth, had come out. Cain had plotted to take over everything, including the families he had manipulated for years. But Noah's safety was still at risk. His abduction wasn't the end of it, it was just the beginning. The moment Noah returned home, the floodgates opened. With his family gathered around him, he finally revealed the full extent of what he had uncovered, Cain's plan to take down Victor and Jack, and the dark truth about what had really happened that night. It wasn't just a murder, it was an attempt to wipe out anyone who stood in Cain's way. Cain had been playing a game of chess with their lives, moving them like pawns in a much bigger game. And now Noah, once again, was the catalyst for everything. His courage to speak up had exposed Cain's deepest secrets and launched the battle that would define the future of both families. The police, now armed with Noah's testimony and the evidence he provided, moved quickly to build their case. Cain's arrest was only a small part of what would be a long and complicated trial. But the damage was done. The families were in turmoil. Jack and Victor's once ironclad bond was shaken to its core, and Noah found himself struggling with the aftermath of the chaos he had helped uncover. But even as he faced the consequences of his actions, Noah knew one thing for sure: the truth had set him free, and it had set the entire city on a path that could never be undone. But the question remained: what role would Claire play in the fallout? If she was indeed behind Noah's kidnapping, if she had orchestrated the entire plot alongside Cain, then what did she have planned for the future? Would she return to finish what Cain started, or had she already fled the city, leaving behind a trail of destruction? And even as Genoa City waited for the next move, another question loomed large: would the Newmans and the Abbotts ever be able to rebuild the trust that had been shattered by one man's obsession with power? As the dust settled, the story was far from over. Cain had been exposed, but the consequences of his actions would reverberate throughout Genoa City for years to come. The families, now fractured and divided, would have to rebuild, but would they ever truly recover from the damage caused by the people they had trusted the most? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. And as for Noah? He had survived the unimaginable, but the truth was that his battle was just beginning. With Cain's empire crumbling, and the shadows of betrayal looming large, Noah would have to find a way to heal from the trauma he had endured. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but with his family by his side, Noah knew one thing: no secret, no matter how dark, could ever keep him in the shadows again.